Hi loves, it's Mai here, and in case you aren't familiar with me and my work, I am a women's well-being mentor and a relationship coach. I'm deeply dedicated to sisterhood and providing women the wisdom that we should have been given as we were coming of age. And part of this is about knowing of healing, and another part of it is very much about learning to tune inwards to truly connect with our own inner wisdom. So each month I go through a certain theme, and the theme of this month is flow. And for this, I've invited my friend Colin Beaven to have a conversation. Colin is an amazing man. He is an author, he's a father, he is a life coach, a Zen teacher, and a documentarist, and many more amazing things. You may have heard of him because he did a documentary called No Impact Man a few years ago. But he is just truly an amazing and incredible being that guides people to their own inner wisdom. So what Colin and I are diving into in this interview is about how we can move forward in life with greater ease, and maybe even with less fear, or how we can move through fear if there are things that we want to accomplish that we are scared to move towards. We're also diving into how we can stay within our own center. So whether it is us leading a company and we are wanting to move that into a certain direction, or it's about our own personal life, Colin gives us practices for how we can do that with greater ease. He also speaks about why January may not be the best month for us to actually begin acting. But may actually be a better time for preparation. But please tune in. He is so full of wisdom and knowledge, and he's so pleasant. And if you are looking to have a life coach, especially also on creating a good organization or about activism, he's your guy. So please tune in. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Colin, and welcome.
Hi, Mai. It's nice to be with you.
Colin, before we dive into the theme that I'd like to address with you, and before I begin asking you any questions, I'd like to just dive into what I know about you so that whoever's listening get a sense of who you are. And what I've learned about you so far. So what I know about you, first of all, is that you are a wonderful man, a deeply pleasant guy, but also a man, I feel, who fully owns himself, which is actually quite rare to come about somebody who owns themselves in such a way where whenever I have a conversation with you, it just feels like, because you own yourself so much, it just brings ease and peace in every conversation. And that's just, yeah, that's really, really magic.
That's nice to hear. Thanks, Mai.
Another thing I know about you is that you are a life coach, a very gifted life coach, and that you are a Zen teacher. You're an activist, an accomplished author, documentarist, a speaker, and I feel like you're a man who show up. I feel like you really show up in the world, and allow yourself to be seen. And again, that just allows anybody else to do the same, which is amazing.
Also a father. Also a father.
Yes. That's true. You are also a father. I actually know that. A devoted father to Bella. I also feel like you've got this deep curiosity of life, but also of people. And you're very interested in how we create a good life and how we create good communities and good societies and good organizations. And I love that because that's such a beautiful place to kind of spring out from in many conversations. And then I feel, well, what I know about you is that you meet people with this openness. And this openness is just divine, because what that does is that makes you feel seen and heard. And it also feels like you're not being judged. So you have a ton of life experience, I know, or it feels like, because you've done so many things, which you use in your work with people. But you just also show up in such a human way, and that's just brilliant. So, yeah.
Oh my, maybe you could ride around on my shoulder and just whisper all those nice things in my ear every so often.
Oh, go check out my website. I wrote about you.
Okay.
Yeah. So the theme that you and I are diving into today is all about flow, because this is January, and I feel that so many people in January, they meet this month and they go straight to goal setting and to New Year resolutions and to, whatever isn't working, and now they just really want to fix all that stuff. But I also feel that although goals can be a good thing, flow and allowing ourselves to kind of work with nature and allow ourselves to evolve rather than to fix is maybe a more nourishing way of meeting ourselves. And that's kind of what I wanted to dive into with you today. So I feel, because you are centered around, how to live a good life. I wanted to ask you, because I feel that people are good. I feel that at a core heart level, soul level, that we are good, but that many times in life we get distracted and we get hurt, and then we get hardened by life. So my first question to you is, how important would you say it is to stay connected and attuned to ourselves when it comes to creating a good life and good communities?
Yeah, I believe that people are good too. Whenever you say people are good, I remember writing about that, and then I got to know, well, what about serial killers? And it's interesting to me, because when we say people are good, then we go to the margins and look for the exceptions to the rule instead of the rule. So similarly, in the world at the moment, people are like very concerned with the world, and they say that they say greed and selfishness and self-centeredness and all of the kind of things. But I say sometimes people will say to me, it's because of the selfish CEOs. And when they say that to me, I say, bring me the selfish CEO that you're talking about, right? So most times the people in the world are not actually motivated by selfishness per se, like that. They're actually motivated by some perversion of love, right? They're even what sometimes people talk about, these so-called selfish CEOs. A lot of times they're motivated by the need to serve their shareholders. They're motivated by the need to serve their employees. They're motivated by the need to serve their families, right? And they can forget that, like all of us, they can forget that they have more stakeholders than just those. And that's what we do. When you say get in touch with yourself and stay in touch with yourself, I also believe that we're motivated by qualities like generosity, love, compassion, patience, all of those things. But we forget who we really are. We come up with ideas about ourselves and I could imagine that I'm me, the separate self, and you're you, the separate self. And for me to get what I need, I have to take things out of what's you and put them in what's me, right? But actually our experience is not like that. If you come to this moment and be in touch with your experience, your experience isn't separated into you and me. It's just this experience, this conversation is both of us, right? When we're calm and at ease, we can settle into our experience in that way. And when we're calm and at ease, then we can then we can then we can just be in conversation and not make you and me. When we're frightened or we have stored trauma, then we jump into this separate thing and imagine I have to protect me from you, or I have to get what I need from you, like that. So there's this way in which if we can process and be in touch with ourselves and move past this fear and trauma, that we can actually function in a way that the goodness that you talked about comes out. And I'll say one last thing. This goodness, when this goodness comes out, I think in the West, when we talk about goodness, because of our Christian traditions, we imagine goodness to equate with martyrdom, right? Mm-hmm. So, if I'm good, then I sacrifice for you. But in the Eastern traditions, this idea of understanding your true nature and being in accord with it and being so-called good means that actually you're in the flow of things, which means not only does the result of your actions benefit others more, but benefits you more. More good comes to you as well.
I love that. So basically, that means that the importance of being connected and attuned to yourself, that's actually kind of the foundation for you being able to show up within those qualities of love, of generosity, of community, and not just to our separate selves, but to, the bigger, to all of us at the same time within union.
Yeah, and to be attuned to yourself means, so what does that mean? So you can get, I know earlier in my journey, like attuned to myself. Okay, what is myself? What is attuned? Like we get lost in the words and the definitions, but to be attuned just means to be really aware what's happening in this moment. Like I can see that your cardigan is beige, that your shirt is black, that I can hear the timbre of my own voice. I can hear your voice. To be attuned just means to pay attention to what's happening right in this moment, to feel the sensations that are happening in my body, to decide whether I want to act to alleviate the sensations in my body or if I have a greater motivation, those types of things. To be attuned just means pay attention to and not get lost in your stories and thinking.
Yeah, because that kind of leads me to the next question, which was, in a world where we're constantly bombarded with products to buy and, where we in many ways are paced, to achieve things and to produce and to, never waste time. How do you see us holding on to ourselves and our inner guidance and our, that state of being? I feel like you're sort of describing there.
Yeah. So to hold on to ourselves just means to come back to yourself with regularity. It's human nature to get lost in the delusions and distractions that we've talked about, that of course we get, desires arise, lust arises, meaning not just lust for sex, but lust for things. All sorts of instincts arise and we get separated from ourselves, but we come back repeatedly. Like, so, in terms of technique, you can just imagine your energy to be centered in between your navel and your groin in that area what I call the hara, right? That's your energy center. And breathe into it. And you can breathe into that place and also put down your stories and allow yourself just to be aware and not know anything, right? And that's a practice you can return to anytime you think of it in an hour. And when you return to that a practice like that, then you can see what's happening. You can feel what's happening. You are in your center, right? Sometimes though, we'll get lost in this story of I need this or I need that and get stuck there. When I work with, say, people who are working with employees, right? Say team leaders, sometimes a member of their team will come to them and the leader won't realize it, but they are triggered somehow by, let's say that their report is questioning them, right? and the leader has a little bit of insecurity. They don't know it, but they have a little bit of insecurity. When the report comes to them and questions them, they start to feel nervous and anxious in their body. They may not know it. And then without knowing any of that, they feel like they have to put the person that's reporting to them in their place and let them know who's really boss, say, right? Even if the report is saying something, the report might be saying it in, say, not a polite way, but they may be saying something of value or letting the boss know something that's important, right? So in a case like that, if you're a leader, if you can return to your body and actually know what's going on in your body, oh, I feel scared that my authority is being questioned, right? If you can have that level of awareness, you say, do I at this moment, do I really need to reestablish my authority? Or is it more important that I listen and hear the underneath of what this person's saying? What's going to be best for my team and my organization, right? That's the practical side of having this practice of returning to your energy center between your groin and breathing deeply into it and putting down your stories and being aware of this moment, is that then you can understand what's actually going on for you and what's important and how you want to respond.
Yeah. It's also as simple as, taking a breath then. So giving yourself a moment before you react, then to just tune in with yourself and be like, and then you have a moment to kind of choose an action rather than you just like having some kind of knee-jerk reaction. Yeah.
Right. Pause. I'm always telling people to pause. They say, well, how do I do that's, I hear what you're saying and I understand what, you're saying how I should behave in that situation, but how do I remember to do it? I think pause. Like, yeah. These are actually the things that I'm talking about are not, they're not legs that we have to paint on the snake, right? The snake already knows how to move. You don't have to paint legs on it. These things that I'm talking about are not things we have to learn to do. We actually know how to do them already, right? Mm-hmm. All that we have to do is be like a mirror to our experience, an unperverted mirror, an undiluted mirror, right? To actually see. So we pause, like you said, breathe, right? And actually see what's going on. And in that, because the knee jerk that you're talking about, a lot of times we have sensations in our body that feel somewhat uncomfortable. A lot of times they're not even that uncomfortable, right? But they're somewhat uncomfortable. And we think that by changing what's happening in the world, we can change the sensation in our body. I don't mean we consciously think that. I mean, we're kind of programmed. I'm going to change what's happening out there. Like even eating or drinking alcohol is a way of like changing something in the world in order to change the feeling in my body, right? So the question is this feeling and is it worth changing the world to change the sensation in my body?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Hadn't thought of it that way. That's a great reminder.
I can be really concrete about this. So I have a teenage daughter, right? Teenagers are challenging, I would say. One of the things that in the training and the coaching that I've had around parenting, right, is that all sorts of things happen. First of all, my authority is definitely questioned all the time, but also I get scared for my daughter. I get deeply scared for her, right? And so what I can do is I can try to change or force or manipulate her behavior to be different so that I don't feel this fear in my body, right? Mm-hmm. So now, obviously, as a parent, there are times when you want to caution and steer a teenager, right? But it's not my daughter Bella's job to change the sensations of fear that I have in my body. Like, I'm allowed to set boundaries. Bella, this is a boundary, and this is a boundary. And it is her job while she lives in my house to stay within the boundaries that I set. But it's my job to decide what kind of boundaries are setting and make clear for her those boundaries, not make her feel like she has to change my interior state, right? So the same thing when you're a leader and working with people. Okay? We don't manage our people. We do unconsciously manage our people in order to change our interior state, but that doesn't serve the highest good.
I feel like what you're saying is also a matter of taking back your power. Like rather than addressing it outside, sure, you can set boundaries, but you keep coming back to yourself. You keep rooting into, well, where am I, how am I staying true to myself and my internal world? And how do I navigate that? Rather than, again, just, going outside and trying to control the outside world, kind of.
I mean, to me, before we started talking, we were talking a little bit about magic and alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
In Zen Buddhism, which is my spiritual tradition, there is a Chinese Zen master called Wu Nang. He was what's called the sixth ancestor. So Zen was started by Bodhidharma, then he transmitted to another teacher, and another teacher. Wu Nang was the sixth ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there is an encounter that Wu Nang has with a young boy monk, and the young boy monk comes to him and he says, "Master, do you see or do you not see?" And Wu Nang answers, "I see fault in myself, but nothing else." So this is really interesting. It doesn't mean I blame myself for everything that happens in the world. It means that what I look at is my relationship to the world and how I need to change myself in relation to the world so that my relationship to the world changes. And then on the other side, when our relationship to the world changes, right? So this, what you're saying, this reclaiming power that you're talking about, is where you actually look at your own participation in things and ask how your participation changes things outside, as opposed to, so how do I need to change myself? That's, to me, reclaiming power, and also the root of magic and alchemy.
Yeah. Amazing. Another thing about you is that I feel that, whenever I look at you, or when I look at how you've kind of gone through a lot of your career, so it feels like you're open in terms of, you look at solutions and you look at possibilities and you look at options. And I'm just wondering if you can speak about the power of allowing freedom and space into our lives versus that goal setting space, where a lot of us get fixed on a certain things, because when we come back to, looking at ourselves and our internal world and things, we can have goals outside of ourselves, or we can have things like perimeters to aim for, and coming back to ourselves. But I feel like whatever you're talking about there as well, with that, we need space, right? And we need freedom, and we need like openness in order to do that. So we can't just stay fixed on one thing. So yeah, can you speak a little bit about the power of that?
Yeah, so goals are not good and not bad, right? They're a part of human nature. We make goals.
Yeah.
Goals are a kind of energy within ourselves, let's say. They're a current, like a water current, like a way in which we want to flow. We want to flow, and as we find ourselves wanting to flow in a certain direction. Two things. Sometimes, again, we set big goals outside of ourselves in order to change our interior state, right? So I want a big house. Why do you want a big house? So I can have parties. Why do you want to have parties? So I can be less lonely. Okay. There are easier ways to be less lonely than to earn the money for a big house. Now, wanting a big house is not good or bad. It's just important to know why you want the big house. So first of all, in goal setting, it's really important to say, what would that give me? What would that, you say, what do you want? A big house. What would that give me? The ability to have parties. What would that give you? The ability to have more friends. What would that give you? Feeling less lonely. Okay. good, have a big house if you want, but if you want to, but why wait until you have a big house to be less lonely? So that's the first thing, is to be open to ourselves. So when you say being open, so there's this energy that flows to a house, right? And but if we concentrate just on that, but that's not my point here, is that that's not all the energy in ourselves or in the universe. That is one flow of energy, right? So if we're open, right, like a mirror, right, so that we're not just attached to this one flow of energy, but we see all the flows of energy that are happening in the universe, right? So including I'm lonely, that's an energy, so I want friends. Then we're free to join our energy of wanting a house with the energies of the world and the other parts of ourself. So could be that if you want a house and you're lonely, actually dealing with your loneliness can in the end help you to get a house faster, because you're not trying to get your energy of wanting to get a house gets purified. It's no longer get a house so I'm not lonely, it's just get a house, right? So that's one, is to be open to yourself, but the other is, how does the energy of my goals and desires connect to the world, right? So early in my career, I wanted to be a writer, but I told myself that was wrong to want to be a writer. I had written and published a fair amount, but it wasn't my main way of earning a living at that time. I told myself it was wrong to be a writer, because a big reason why I wanted to be a writer is because I got such a kick out of seeing like my name on the top of things, right? It's like megalomania, right? So that was like an energy wanting to have that thing. But then I realized that I had this energy, this propulsion, but it had no direction. You know, it was just like, I want to go, but where do you want to go? Well, I want my name on the top of things, but why? Then I realized I could use that energy, that propulsion, in service of bigger things, right? I could use it in service of, on one level, earning more money for myself, earning money to support myself and my family, right? I could, but also for the world, that the things that I could write about could help others and help the world, right? So that what seemed like a so-called selfish energy was actually could join in with the energies of the world, right? So this is a long way of saying, when you're talking about being open, you have these goals, and so my approach to goals is to know what the goal is, but also see all the energies in the world. Like I have a goal for when I went, and see how those energies might join together. I don't know if that sounds too, does that sound too abstract?
No, I feel like what you're doing is you're describing how there's a flow, but then you get the container almost. And then I feel like you're bringing in a wider container where you have, there's a container, like, okay, so I've got a flow, there's something I want to, I want to do. But why do I want to do it? Then that's the small container. That's like, what does it do for me? But then you have a wider container outside of that. That's like, okay, so how does that contribute?
Yes.
So at least that's how I perceive what you're saying.
Yeah, flow is like, it's like getting in a river. Like say there's a place on the other side of the river that you want to get, right? You have the energy of wanting to cross, but you also have to understand the energy of the river too. And if you combine your energy with the energy of the river, then you can get to the other side in the way that conserves energy, that, so there's this getting across the river means how can your efforts not just get your goals, but serve other people? Is it just for me? Is it just or is it for all people? That type of thing.
But in that, I'm just wondering how important is trust in that, or how important is trust as a whole when it comes to, creating a good life for ourselves?
Trust is good when you have it. But my experience is that I don't always have it, right? So trust is like a thought or a feeling that arises in my mind, right? But fear is also a thought or a feeling that arises in my mind, right? So, but this practice that we talked about, where if you breathe into that place between your navel and your groin, into the hara, right? Give into that place, bring yourself back into now, right? Then in this place right here, there's nothing to be scared of, and there's no need for trust, right? In my conversation with you, there's nothing in this moment, there's no threat that I can find, right? So trust is important if you can't cut through the fear, if you can't return to this moment, right? If you're so frightened, then maybe you can raise up the energy of trust. But another way is to come to the place before fear and trust, which is just right here, you and I speaking to each other.
Presence.
Yeah, presence means being right here, seeing what is, and there's nothing, there's just nothing but the sound of my voice, the sound of your voice, the light of the computer shining on me, the feeling of the fabric of my couch, right? Just there, we're just 100% here. And we are all things, actually, at this arc. It's back to what I talked about earlier, which is that we don't actually experience separateness. We think separateness, but we don't experience separateness. If we can cut through the thought of separateness, then we're to the place before fear and trust, which is not knowing, just experiencing right here, right now.
Yeah. I feel like you just explained why it to me feels like you own yourself so much.
Huh.
It's because when you show up in that state, that's the same as there's no judgment. There's just like being right there in that space. And for me, in all my interactions with you, that's just been contagious. And I think it is. I think that when we show up in that way, it allows others to tap into that same field of being where, right, oh, there's a person there that reminds me to just be, and that it's okay. We can be just here. And for me, at least, I get that same way with nature. When I step out into her and I allow myself to just take a moment to sift everything else away that was there before, or whatever I want that moment to be. And I'm just there with her, grounding. I feel like that's the same way, but for me, that's the same as what often happens when I'm in conversation with you. So many things just fall away, and you own yourself, so that's contagious for me.
But before this conversation, when we were talking before we started recording,
yeah,
you also talked about, you didn't talk just about being in nature, you talked about being of nature, as though you and nature are not separate, right? So it's not you in nature, really, it's nature you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that's kind of the same thing that we're talking about. Like just now, this is my conversation, me.
For sure. I'm just wondering, can you speak to how you can grow this space? Because I feel that it's a journey to get to this space more and more. And because, at least for me and in my own experience, when I get to that state of there's no trust, there's no fear. I didn't realize this until you told me just now that that's actually a place to be. But when I'm there, when there is no fear, there is just being. I didn't always, I guess I always had access to that, but we just forget. So if somebody wants to remember deeper, and remind themselves and create a practice for getting into that space more and more, what should they do?
Yeah, so I mean, there are formal practices that already exist. So the first place I would point someone to is to find a community that exercises the practice that you think could help you, right? So, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. But also not only that, but everything is relationship. We just, on a very practical level, we can't eat or do anything without relationship to others. But on the mystical and spiritual level, everything is only relationship. There's no separation. But so finding a community of practitioners of some kind means that, first of all, they teach you their technology, but second of all, you're getting a place to practice being in a relationship with them, whilst holding on to the practice or spiritual attitude that everybody's trying to practice, right? So, and if you find a relationship that truly embodies some sort of spiritual practice, then you can be in them and practice being in relationship with them in their practice way, and then you can take that into the rest of the world, right? So that's one thing. You have a safe place to make your spiritual inquiry with others, and then you also get to experience even having friction with those others, right? But in this kind of spiritual practice container. So all on a moment-to-moment, day-by-day thing, if you aren't ready to find a community, right? So how do you return to this place that we're talking about? So we have, in my tradition, the Zen tradition, we have a number of practice forms, right? So sometimes if our bodies are so agitated that we can't return to this quiescent place, and so that we can see clearly, then we have a practice that's bowing or prostration practice. It's so where you start standing up, you end up all the way on the ground. It's a little bit like yogic sun salutation. So that's one thing you can do with some sort of physical practice. That what is important when you do the physical practice is that you have this big question: what am I? What's the truth? And then you let go of any sort of answer. Just don't know. Right? Just you actually return to the physical practice, be it yoga, be it bowing, be it whatever. That's one way. Then another practice form is to say a mantra. So as they say that, I like to say sometimes human beings have one-track minds, which means in the old days, one-track mind meant all you thought about was sex. But by one-track mind, what I mean is there's only one track in your mind. It can only hold one thing at a time. So you can hold a mantra in your mind, right? And when the fear and everything is getting in your way of seeing clearly, then you can bring in a mantra instead of the obsessive fears. So mantras, I won't say, I'll say this: we have a mantra in our tradition, which is just clear mind, don't know. So on the in-breath, clear mind, on the out-breath, don't know. So clear mind, what is clear mind? Don't know, like that. So you can say mantras. And then the last thing is any sort of contemplation or meditation, to have you can do a quick one, which is which we've talked about several times now, which is this returning to this place between our navel and our groin, this hara place, and breathing into it and just being present. Or you can sit for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 40 minutes in the mornings and the evenings and just return to that place. And it's like a muscle, right? We in my tradition, we call it your don't know center, right? Your don't know. It's the place we go where there's no stories, right? And if you return to it regularly, it becomes your ground, the place that you stay, right?
Yeah. I think the next thing I kind of want to ask about is, if you're a person that are afraid of losing your current life, but there's something that you want to change, how do you bridge that? And I feel like right now, also in this, you're speaking a lot about spirituality. How do you feel that can assist you in there? What's the power of that? Or nature, or whatever. Like what can you sort of do to loosen your grip on your reality to embrace the thing that you actually want. Because I feel like so many people are stuck right there. It's that they want something else. They're not truly happy here. And I feel like so often what we're being told is that, oh, your fear, or you need to be so fed up with where you are for you to finally do the, the next growth bit, the next move. But oftentimes it's hard to get to that point where you're kind of like ready and out the cliff. So is there a way that you, in your experience, can sort of make that an easier transition?
You said, when you started the question, you said, if you're a person who wants to make a change, but you're scared to make the change and you feel there's some energy to stay where you said, if you're a person like that. But the thing is, every person is a person like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. My practice, both in my own spiritual practice, but also with my practice with my clients, is actually first to reflect, behave like a mirror, and help my clients see the truth of these things. So sometimes I want to do this and I want to do that, and finally I say, yeah, you want to do that, but you're scared, right? And then they might say, well, yeah, but I really want to do it. Yeah, yes, and you're scared, right? So that means sooner or later, I help my clients get to a place where they just can see the fullness of themselves. I want this and I'm scared, right? It's not even a but, it's just, I want this and I'm scared, right? So one thing is actually, if we can be in the presence of the fullness of our experience, right? Which is just be, this means, don't even tell ourselves stories about how our inner experience is right or wrong. I'm scared. That's not right or wrong. That's just true, right? So when we can reflect and mirror the truth of our own experience, then our experience becomes unstuck and can change, right? So first of all, when I encounter a client, let's say I have a client who has a particular goal. So I will always tell them, often tell them, depending, I do different things with different clients, but I'll say, write down all the reasons, all the things that would give you if you got it, right? Then when they're done with that, I would say, write down all the things you would lose if you got it, right? So I actually what I'm asking them to do is to bring into consciousness the reasons why they're blocking themselves from having that thing, right? Then I say, okay, now I want you to rewrite your goal in a way where you both get the things that you want, but you also don't lose the things that you don't want to lose. In other words, you change your goal to honor both energies, right? The aspirational energy and the stick energy, right? So, it means fold our fears into. So let's say for the sake of argument, somebody wants to move abroad, right? I want to move abroad, but I'm scared of being lonely. Okay, so at first it'd be, I want to move abroad, but I'm scared of being lonely. Oh, you want to move abroad and you're scared? Yeah, I'm scared, but really I want to move. Yes, but you're also scared. What are you scared of? Being lonely. Okay, tell the truth. You want to move abroad and you don't want to be lonely, right? That means taking the objection, folding it in, right? Yeah. I want to be abroad. Okay, how do you move abroad and not be lonely? Right? So the first thing to me is to honor the fears and actually see them not as fears, but also aspirations. Right? So sometimes when I fear, a lot of times when I fear, it's because I am blocking myself from an aspiration. Right? I want this, but I'm scared that I can't have it, right? I'm scared. I want this other thing, but I'm scared if I have this other thing that I won't have it, right? So another thing just to say is that we we are tied into like almost like a net by our relationships, right? If you think of a net, it's all like little knots with strings going out. And when you pull on the knot in any direction, all the other knots pull you back to where you are, right? So the truth of the matter is that when we change, we do strain all of our relationships with other people, our relationships with money, our relationships with our possessions, our relationships with ourselves. All of those relationships are strained, right? So one thing is to actually say is, as I want to move and I see that I'm straining these other relationships, which of those relationships do you choose to serve as you change? And which of them do you choose to sever? But choose, understand, I'm sensing the strain in those relationships, right? Now, what do I want to do about it as I change? All of this means, ultimately, don't reject any of our experience, but bring it into our awareness, right? So that I can deal with it. And that's what, in my relationships with clients, a lot of my work is actually about showing them love, empathy, congruence. I don't mean in a sappy way, just being able to be with them enough that they can be with themselves, right? And see who they are, who they truly are, both their goals and their fears of those goals, so that they can serve both, right? So that they can actually act. So the last thing to say is, I'm talking about this process as though it's like, do this, like bring it into awareness, then, look at your objection. But the other thing is that when we bring our the totality of our inner experience into awareness, it moves and changes and grows by itself, right? Because that's just an energy that's in us. When we try to block it out of our awareness, right? I don't want to admit that I'm scared of my goal because I'm worried that my fear will stop me from getting my goal, right? So I block my fear. We calcify it. We calcify the block. When we bring the fear into the awareness, it can change. It can change. Not only that, but we change too.
I love everything about what you just said, because I feel like a lot of what's out there today is like, feel the fear and do it anyway. I feel like there's such a focus on us just kind of like plunging through without actually honoring everything that's alive within us, which includes our fear. And it feels like what you're talking about there is like a way of honoring yourself deeply and everything that's alive and everything that's present. And then just a magical bit of that is that once you do that, like you say, things will start to evacuate and move organically and naturally, because some of the things that you were afraid of, you don't have to fear anymore, because naturally you'll see them in a different light, or there'll be some sort of energy that moves things around. And I feel that that's so important, especially if you think about January, where everybody is just all about objective goals potentially, or just like, whatever, now I'm just going to do it, without actually having their whole heart in it, or actually honoring themselves on that journey of transformation. Because I feel everything that you're saying there is exactly what I asked. It's like, how do we make it easier? How do we make it less frightening? How do we make it more open, so that it just gets easier to take those steps? Yeah.
One thing about, when we were talking before and you said you wanted to talk about like January and the new year and setting goals and setting aspirations. One thing about, I think that's important to say about January is that January is still the dark times. It's still the gestational period, right? So we kind of wake up January 1st, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get a new partner. I'm going to, in January it's a time when our bodies are not prepared to do that, right? Now this is to your point, like, I really want to do all these things that I said I would do on New Year's, but I have resistance. But and I'm saying, so actually bring the resistance into your consciousness, right? Oh, part of the resistance is my body is not yet ready to do in January. I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but I am saying that there is something about a misunderstanding of January 1st, right? That January is a gestational period. So is February, right? This is a time to gently and carefully begin to conjure and understand our aspirations, to sense the energies within ourselves, to sense the energies within the world. It's not the time to burst into action. Now, I don't mean to speak for everybody. I don't believe that, but what I am saying is that there is some element of that, and we can really kind of screw ourselves up. Like, wait, I said I was going to lose 10 pounds midway through January, but I haven't. You know, part of that is because our bodies are still in the preparation period, right? Yeah. We're still in the preparation period in that stage. We have honoring the rhythms within ourselves and the truth of ourselves and the truth of the world. It doesn't mean that we can't get what we want. It actually means two things. It means, one, that if we honor all of those rhythms, what we want may change. That's scary, right? A lot of us are like, wait, if what I want changes, I'm not going to have the life that, like, so in other words, if we honor the rhythms, like if we honor the fears, we might change. We might decide that what we want is not exactly what we want. Like, that's like saying, I want a house. Why, what will a house give you? Blah, blah, it will give you friends. Oh, but now you told me that, so now I'm going to fix my loneliness, but I'm never going to get my house, right? It's just kind of like I'm scared to actually look at it because it will change me. But that change is actually bringing you more aligned with who you are anyway, right? We don't want to accept it or admit it. That's what. But the other side of things changes too, is that when you sense the energies, the truth of the energies, then you can use them, right? So both what you want will change when you sense everything, but so will everything change to align with what you want. The two will move together. Does that sound? I feel like I'm talking like in a very esoteric way, but it's also deeply practical. And
I think what you're speaking to is, I'm sorry, but I have to say it, manifestation. like universal laws of how, how we are supported by, greater forces. Once we align ourselves, I feel that, once we honor where we're at, like our whole selves, and not just where we're at in our lives, but also what you're talking about, the rhythm of, the seasons and, all the different cycles that's going on at the same time, then suddenly there's that greater container that comes in once again, that we're also part of. So I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about.
It is. So I'm going to say something kind of on the manifestation side, and then I want to say something really kind of practical about a conversation I had with a CEO recently. So on the manifestation side, so the writers that I like that talk most about manifestation talk about a stage before manifestation, which is actually the January and February period that we were just at, the dark period, the gestational period, which means the first thing in manifestation is to become open to all the energies. You can, depending on your beliefs, you can pray, you can ask for guidance, but is to ask widely, what is it that should be manifested, right? That just doesn't mean for me, but again, it's the alignment of my energies with the world energies. So what in the world needs to be manifested, not just manifested for the world instead of me, but manifested for both of us, because the energy of the world and the energy with me, when they're aligned, bring something about. So the first step is to ask, what needs to be manifested? That's, again, this mirror thing, this actually seeing things as they are. Then move towards through the gestation and then into manifestation. So there's a little bit of, it's like surfing, right? Sometimes people think, I don't want to know what the world wants. I know what I want. But that would be like a surfer saying, you know, I don't want to ride the wave. I want to ride the trough. You can't ride the trough. You wait for the right wave. Sometimes a surfer will skip a wave, right? They just wait for finally they choose a wave that they want and they ride that wave, right? So this is the same, like the world has waves in it, right? It doesn't mean that you have to ride the world's waves. You can choose the wave that you want, but it's an interaction between what you want and what the world wants. That's that's my understanding of manifestation.
Yeah.
So I was talking to a CEO recently, and we were talking about how after that pandemic, things had changed. First of all, in terms of whether people wanted to come back to the office or not, but also people were beginning to ask for and demand different things. They wanted childcare. They wanted flexible working hours. They wanted a whole bunch of different things. And and then also talking about the Great Resignation, like people are just quitting or going slow or not working hard. So the CEO that I was working with, we were talking about, first of all, you have to sense what's going on. This is a really practical, like we're not talking about energy waves. You sense what's going on, which means listen to the people that work for you. You know, what do they need, right? Then if you have a workplace where your workers' needs aren't getting met, then some of their energy has to go towards getting their needs met. They can't give as much energy to their work because they're off getting their other needs met, right? So how can you help to accommodate their needs, right? So if you can accommodate their needs, then the energy of your organization and you and your leadership and the energy of the people that report to you begin to align, and you're all going in the same direction. Now that may mean that you partly change the direction of your organization, right? So let's say, for the sake of argument, you de-emphasize for that period profit and emphasize worker retention, keeping people in their jobs, right? So you have moved away from maybe what you want. If what you want is profit, you may move away from it temporarily until you've gotten over the worker retention period, and then you'll move back to the profit period if that's appropriate at the next period, right? So then the CEO said, but what if I get in conversations with my team members and what they want requires me to bend further than I want to bend, right? Or the organization. So at that point, like that's the point where the relationship doesn't work, right? That's the point where you say the needs of this person and the needs of me, or this goes for romantic relationships for that. It goes for any relationship. The needs, we cannot bend. We want to go in too much opposite directions, and we cannot bend enough to accommodate each other. So then we end the relationship.
Yeah. So it feels like what you were explaining there is that you work with the flow. Like if you listen to your employees and you see, okay, well, how, and then you catch one of those waves and then you move it into that, you go with that current, but then you're at the same time, you don't lose track of where you're going. So if you can see, oh, well, that wave is never going to come, or it's not going to, take me in that direction, that's when you kind of like, okay, done. But everything that you're saying as well, I love, because I feel like we hear a lot about surrender in many stages. And I feel like so many people have such a resistance to surrender because it feels like that would mean giving away all your power. But everything that you've spoken about in this interview, I feel is very much about how you can work with the flow, how you can impact the flow the way that you that's in alignment with where you want to go and what feels, true and good for you. And so there's a sense of surrender in everything that you're saying, because there needs to be surrender if you are open to address a situation, because that may mean that in that conversation, you, like with that, the last employee, or in the last, or in the romantic relationship, where you're like, okay, that's when you cut it, because you can't, you know, you want to go opposite directions. But so often when we actually do have those conversations, it turns out that there is alignment. It's just about working with the flow in a different way than we kind of have had our fixed idea of what it was meant to look like.
Yeah, so it's occurring to me as you talk to Mai, that this actually references back to an earlier part of our conversation. So let's say that it's the same thing. The CEO is facing this situation, as he was in real life, this particular CEO, of workers either wanting to quit or go slow, and he had to figure out how to serve their needs so that the energy. So let's say, actually, before you even got to that stage, a worker comes forward and just says, I'm going to quit, right? And then the CEO feels fear in their body. I'm scared, everybody's going to quit, right? So they cannot at that moment engage in conversation, right? So the first stage is actually sense what's going on in me, sense what's going on in, oh, I have fear that they're going to quit. Am I going to die if they quit, right? No. Okay, I don't need to address this fear in my conversation with them right now, right? I'm aware of that body. So by bringing it into consciousness, I can decide I don't have to deal with this fear right now. If it's unconscious, then I find myself going, well, either offering them more money that I can't afford, or telling them to, take their life and shove it, or whatever, right? But if instead I can actually know that I have fear and that I'm not going to serve it, then I can get into this sensing conversation with them, and I can start to work on, can our needs align, sort of thing. So there's this, so we're really looking, it's all the same thing. It's all about what's going on inside me, what's going on inside them. Where does the energy want to go? I want to say one more thing about this business of aligning and surrender, and which is, there's a story in my tradition where a king perceives that an army is coming and is going to destroy the kingdom. And so he prays to all the bodhisattvas for help. And finally, one of them comes along and takes his kingdom and shrinks it and puts it in a bowl and puts a lid on top so that the kingdom is hidden, right? So, and this is the idea. And then, and waits a week, and then takes the lid off and looks at the tiny little kingdom, right? When he takes the lid off and looks at the tiny little kingdom, there's smoke, there's dead bodies. In other words, the tiny little kingdom had been attacked by a tiny little army, and the war still happened. That's to say, what that means is, they would say there's no escape. In Buddhism, they say there's no escaping unmerited karma.
Yeah.
Right. But there is such a thing as working with unmerited karma. Right. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that I'm a really good manifester, right? That I can manifest, boom, like that. I can make things happen. I can ignore the currents of the world and make things happen. Some of us can do that. It doesn't make the currents of the world go away, right? It means that you may have manifested that thing, but the current of the world is eventually going to come to roost anyway. So the point of surrender and alignment is, okay, so instead of shrinking that tiny little kingdom, instead of shrinking it and hiding it, we accept that we see our karma, we see what's coming, we sense, and we actually deal with that. If it means getting in more hospital supplies, I don't know, or doing something to actually deal with the truth of the karma, the truth of the flows that are happening in the world outside of just the flow of our desire, then we can bring them together and serve the whole of the energy, right? If we deny that world energy is happening, then we may get what we want in the short term, but in the longer term, that energy crashes against us.
Yeah. But I feel like you're just coming back to that openness and that whole thing that I said about you in the very beginning, which is one of the reasons why I think that you're such a gifted, life coach. you bring that openness, you bring that perspective, you make it so that people dare to look at the things, because they're in there, they can find a solution as well. But it's the moment that we do like this, or where we stay rigid, or, where we are not open, where we're not curious, that's when we crumble and fall into something that we don't really want to do. That's where we react rather than wait and take action in a way that actually benefits us. And I think, all throughout this interview, I just feel like that's what you're just demonstrating again and again and again. I really hope that many people in January, will listen to this, because I feel like this is just a way of life. And if you want to have a fresh new start on life in January, maybe your perspective in a way of remembering how to honor yourself and stay open, and cultivate less fear, and just being. That's maybe the biggest gift that you provide people.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was thinking while you were talking, Mai, that so I also work with other coaches and therapists. And if you want to be a person that helps people to grow, the work you have to do yourself is to learn to be able to be, if you want to be open to other people so that you can provide, you have to learn to be really open to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You have to work with the energies and trust your own fears and trust your own terrors and trust all of that. Be able to sit with what goes on in you. And then if you can sit with what goes on in you, you can sit with what goes on in other people.
Yeah. At least that's what I'm learning on my journey of, I've been probably working on myself for the last 18 years or so. I was quite young when I started, which was a gift. But everything I'm learning is exactly that. The depth that I go to meet myself is where I can meet and, hold or point others to. And it's only, the amount of work that I do on myself. And I feel that textbooks and, things that you learn along the way in terms of processes or theory and stuff like that, it's beneficial, but it's the actual body work. It's like the actual embodied work that you do on yourself that determines how you're able to show up for yourself first, and then the rest of the world. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. But it's so evident that you've done so much. Yeah.
I had a lot of trauma to start with, so I had a lot of work to do.
Yeah. It's tough, but if you can see it as a gift, or if you can, meet it with that kind of openness, it really can be an incredible force for good.
Yes, it can. It provides some of that energy and flow in a certain direction that we talked about. Yeah.
I just want to thank you so much, Colin, for joining in this conversation with me, and sharing all of your wisdom with whoever listens in, but also for all the work that you do in the world. It's a huge inspiration. And something to kind of root back into. And at least in my case, I feel like I see so many opportunities when I look at your journey and the things that you've done with your life, which is, I really thank you for that.
Thanks, Maya. I really enjoyed this conversation.